Welcome to episode 3 of the Beyond podcast, where we interview people who we find inspiring, who might inspire you too.
Our special guest for today's episode is Sneha. Sneha just graduated from UC Berkeley, majoring in electrical engineering and computer science, as well as business administration and management as part of Berkeley's M.E.T program. Currently, she serves as a student investor in the House Fund, where she helps identify top student, faculty, and alumni startups to invest in. Previously, she has served as a project leader for the Berkeley Group, where she and her team worked with the nonprofit Worldreader. She has also interned at Reddit and Tripwire, where for both companies, she worked as a product management intern. Welcome, Sneha. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm really honored to be on, and I'm really excited
Thank
to
you.
chat today.
Yeah. Just to preface this podcast, Sneha and I met through the Berkeley Group, and she was my senior consultant for for FII. So that was really exciting. But yeah, just to get started, I guess, could you tell us a little bit more about, I guess before Berkeley? I know like MET is like a really awesome program since you get to get the best of both worlds at Berkeley with, a really strong like computer science and EE background, as well as a really strong like business background. Like what motivated you to apply that to that program? And, you know, what experiences in high school helped you like apply and like choose that path forward for Berkeley?
Yeah. So I'm a part of the founding class at M.E.T. So back then, like M.E.T. wasn't really that popular because it was the first year that they were actually recruiting students. So like the way I found it was really random. Like my sister was just on the Berkeley website and she saw this little pop up that said management and technology, and she was like, "Oh, that sounds like for what you're looking for," because at that time everybody knew of the M&T program at UPenn, but no, like
Hype.
this was kind of like, yeah, it was
Yeah.
hype, and that was the one I actually like. I really wanted to get into. Plot twist, I didn't get in, but I got into something even better, which was the M.E.T program.
Right.
So I would say like it's definitely not like I came into the college search like looking for M.E.T. I just like happened to find it. At that
Hmm.
point, I was mainly looking for like undergrad CS degrees. My thought process was like, okay, if I get a CS degree, I can get like an MBA later and kind of like make do with that, since there aren't that many degree, like programs that do both at the same time.
Right.
In terms of like why I wanted to do like CS in business, I mean, I was 18 at the time, so like
Yeah.
my like realm of experiences is really small.
Totally fair.
And still, I guess now looking back on it, I think I made a good choice. But I did robotics in like high school, and that was like the main thing that got me into the CS field. Like my high school team, well, technically not, it was like a community neighborhood team.
Hmm.
We were pretty intense, like very like we went up to the world championships. Like it was like
Oh,
one of the things I
snap.
did like 8 to 10 hours. Yeah, and like it was some like I was a robot driver, which is like we use like Xbox controllers to like drive like these pretty big robots, like 50-pound robots.
That's so
And so
cool.
that was like the first time like I got into like the idea of like CS like versus, like outside of AP computer science, which is like such
Hmm.
a small version of computer science in itself. So yeah, that's kind of like the real reason I was like, okay, I'm into CS. I had done a few like in like hospital internships, like pre-med internships at a lab, figured out that it wasn't for me. Like I really liked the idea of becoming a doctor, but I
Yeah.
just don't think I was made for something like that.
Hmm.
So yeah, that kind of is like why I ended up like trying to do something in CS in business.
That's super interesting. So, did you focus a lot in high school, like towards exploration, since you mentioned you did some medical stuff programs in high school? Did you try to like explore like all these different like potential careers in high school, or like
Yeah,
what was your sort of mindset in high school?
yeah. I think when I thought about high school, so like I started out, I think like a lot of people, not a lot of people, but like a lot of people from where I'm from, like a lot of people thought like, oh, you become like a doctor, and like
Yeah.
that's like the coolest thing to become. And so like, and also like you're coming out of middle school where
Yeah.
like you don't really love math, like biology seems cool and stuff like that. And so I did a lot of exploration. Like I volunteered at a hospital nearby, and then I did like this like I did a lab internship at like this tuberculosis lab here. I'm in Portland, Oregon. That's where I went to high school. So at the Oregon Health Sciences University. So like that's what I focused my first 2 years on. And like I did a few internships those summers. And I think that's like coming out of it, I realized I didn't love it as much as I thought I would, especially like the lab portion. And then also
Mm-hmm.
like the amount of schooling and just like I just like felt like you need to really have a passion, and like the people who were like my mentors in those internships truly had that passion and I could see that. And so like then I spent the next 2 years kind of doing something like just trying to do something else. Like I like something that my dad used like kind of stressed a lot when I was growing up was like this idea that like you have to try different things because you don't
Mm,
know, like you can't make an
right.
assumption off of like a limited set of like understanding. So yeah, like I tried to do as many things as I could. Obviously I didn't do any like all the fields out there, and
Right.
there's probably something I would love to. But out of the things I did end up like doing in internships or like throughout my high school years, I ended up liking robotics the most.
That's super cool. And now that like you've spent like 3 years at Berkeley, like what were some goals that you had going into Berkeley? You had like a robotics background and you're really interested in that. And how have those like goals changed throughout your time at Berkeley now that you're graduating?
I know. um wow, I mean, I feel like I'm such a different person than I was when I entered
Mm-hmm.
Berkeley. I mean, I think I entered like like a lot of like, like fresh faced college students, like very motivated, very
Right.
like I honestly I don't know why, but I was like, I want to be in a business frat. And I was like, I want to like become an investment banker, which was very like I think like
Interesting.
the summer before I like came to Berkeley, I think I did a lot of like research into consulting and
Mm,
iBanking because it was like one of those things that's like kind of mentioned in high school as like a
right.
cool job, but not really
Yeah,
much
it's
talked
hype.
about. Yeah, it's hyped, I guess. But so I was like, oh my God, McKinsey, like BCG, like,
Yeah.
JP Morgan. And like I didn't actually know anything about, but I was like, okay, I need to like go into big, like a big business frat. Like I need, like, I thought very like, I was very like business minded. And then I got
Mm,
there and like I think after like the first semester of like first, I got rejected from like every club I applied to, which was
same.
like, whoa, But also it was like I think a wake up call to like first I'd gone through like so many of those Weeder CS classes, and I was
Mm,
just like, I finally figured out like, okay, like Berkeley's like a whole nother level of academically rigorous. Like I think a
right.
lot of Berkeley students, we all come into Berkeley like pretty like used to being academically like adept at everything we do. And so you come to Berkeley with that like same confidence and you realize like, oh, everybody here is like me. Like it's not like the same as like high school where like I can kind of skate by, or at least I skated by a lot on just like pure like procrastination, pure like I can probably do this.
Right.
And so I think like after that first semester a lot of things changed. One, I figured out like I wanted to join a club, one that I really cared about, and then two that like I really liked the people because I had so many friends who had joined clubs like right away that because they had accepted them, and then they just like didn't like the club. It became like
Mm,
more of a chore, and like they just
right.
it was like it also I also figured out like most of your social scene comes from clubs, at least like if I'm not part of Greek life. So like I was like, okay, like a lot of my like extra like the tertiary friends would come from a club. So I feel like I rambled on and lost the plot of your question. But yeah, so I feel like everything switched after my first semester.
Mm-hmm.
I got into TBG, which is a consulting club. So then I started thinking about becoming a consultant because a lot of people from TBG obviously do. Um, and then I think somebody like randomly mentioned product management my freshman year too. And so like that sounds cool, CS in business. And there's a
Right.
cybersecurity company, Tripwire. I'm not gonna tell you my whole life story, so I'm just gonna slip forward. So
Okay.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
I got into product management. I really liked it. I joined the house fund and that was like VC. And so then I
Right.
completely switched. Like I kind of lost this whole iBanking thing because I realized one, I'm just like, that's just not my vibe. I'm like just not intense enough to do something like that.
A lot of
And
hours.
it also just like I don't have a passion for like I honestly don't know what iBankers do. So like,
Fair enough.
I don't know. I didn't end up liking that like whole route or path, or
Hmm.
I ended up going on something different. And so yeah, through the house fund, I like met a bunch of startups. I realized how much I like being a part of the ideation process and like building something.
Right.
And although like that wasn't really my role at the house fund, more it's like funding student founders and hearing their really cool ideas. Like I really like the idea of like building something and being part of a process, which you get from being a PM.
Right.
So that kind of ended up that's why now like I'm ended up doing like an APM program after I'm graduating.
Wow, that's very exciting. Are you doing like the APM program for
I,
Reddit?
I no, so I'm joining Lyft.
Oh,
Um,
hype. I
yeah,
didn't even know that. Congrats.
yeah. I'm very excited. It's definitely gonna be a cool experience.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about, I guess your transition into like product management. Like how did you break into that field? Because I feel like a lot of students don't know a lot about product management, but when they hear about it, they just don't know like how to get started. Like some think like, oh, I need to have like a CS background, or like, oh, I need to do X, Y, and Z. Like, what are your tips for students who are trying to get some experience for product management positions?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it is a bit of a black box for like university students.
Hmm.
It used to be much more traditionally like an MBA focused field. And so, like, there definitely are like very limited opportunities for undergrads. I think like the main thing I would give in terms of advice is like, well, I use this site called the APM list. I think it's just called apmlist.com, or you can Google it. That has like I think somebody really nice just like updates that site whenever like applications open, and they have like an APM, but they also have internships. And since there's so few, like when they open, if you're really looking to get into product management, you need to like apply, like much like the college, like getting into college. I think a lot of things in the job search world are similar in that it's a numbers game. Like
Mm,
one, you have to kind of put yourself out there, and of course you're going to get rejected like a lot of times. Like I'm getting rejected for jobs I forgot I applied to, like it just happens. But I also think
right.
like at one point you got to keep applying. And then the second
Hmm.
thing, I think also like if you have any connections to the PM world, like somebody you know who's a PM, somebody you know who's an APM,
Mm,
like even if you like aren't like great friends with them, or like like you like met them once, you like kind of know them, they probably know your name, like definitely reach out. Like
yeah.
I know now, like as somebody who's graduated, if somebody from Berkeley that I like met once reached out, I'd be happy to talk, because like who wouldn't? Like you kind
Right.
of like nobody's gonna be like mad about that. And I
Yeah.
think you just have to like approach it and kind of get like your foot in the door. And like one, that person may be able to refer you to their company, or at least like two, they'll give you some advice on like, oh, like if you have an interview coming up, what can you say? Because like those are the people that have gone through all of these interviews, which are
Hmm.
usually very, very like hard to prepare for somewhat. And also
Right.
like there are very certain things that people are usually looking for in PM interviews, especially for undergrads. So yeah, I mean, I think like just don't be afraid about like reaching out to people. And at least for me, like I got really lucky that I got a product management internship my freshman year, because like I kind of went into it asking for it. Like that company, they were looking for an intern, and I said I want to be in PM. And so then they were like, oh, like yeah, we can like get you into our PM team, but that wasn't like initially what they were recruiting for.
Wow.
And then from there, like Tripwire is a pretty small company, and then from there I like used a connection I got through the house fund, who like he like had left, he started his own startup, but he used to be a PM at Reddit. And so I just like emailed him and I was like, hey, I've applied through like their normal portal, but I'm like really interested, and I know you worked there. And he was like a PM at Reddit, like when Reddit was really small.
Right.
And so he was like, yeah, I'll email like your resume to the recruiter. And
That's
like
so
he did
nice.
it, and like within a day I got a response. And like I had submitted an application to Reddit like a month ago, and I hadn't gotten anything back. And so like
Wow.
I think it shows you like, as much as I hate to say it, like you like it is kind of a connections and a network thing.
Right.
Um, I mean, even for Lyft, like now where I'm going to go after I graduate, like Nika, who is currently a
Did
Lyft
you?
AP, actually she's a Lyft PM now.
Yeah.
She was a TBG alumni, and she also was like somebody who I met because she did a dual degree at Berkeley before the M.E.T
Yeah.
program existed. So she's like a god.
Yeah.
And so I contacted her, like she gave me a referral to the APM program, the Lyft APM program. And I think like without her, I definitely, not definitely, well, I most probably wouldn't have gotten like that first round interview. And I
Right.
think like the referrals are just really helpful. Like once you get into the interview rounds, at that point, it's like up to you and like your skills to get through the whatever happens next. But I
Right.
think a referral or like a connection can like help you go from like that huge application pool to like the much smaller, like more less substantial like interview pool that they actually like start to like get to know you. And like that's
Right.
where you can really show yourself, right? Because like a resume is only like so much of who you are.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. In terms of my experience for like software engineering internships, I realized like getting your foot into the door is a lot to do with networking at hackathons in my experience. Like
Mhm.
my first internship or like real internship at like a medium-sized company, like at Etsy, was going to Cal Hacks, talking to the recruiter, and like having a really great conversation and like following up with her to get like that coding challenge. And I definitely recommend for students who like have like limited experience, like me when I was applying to Etsy, to really put yourself out there and contact people that you might have talked to like once or twice, to like see what opportunities there are for you. And now like that I'm in like my third year, like those relationships that you build in like your early internships, like you mentioned how you like met some really cool people like at Tripwire, and you met that person who worked at Reddit like early on. Like
Mhm.
those connections are really important. So definitely in your early internships, definitely cultivate those relationships and like keep in touch with those people, because they can help you in the future for years to come. So definitely like make the most out of like those experiences and meet as many people as possible.
Yeah,
But yeah,
definitely.
I don't know. That's like super cool. Let's
Thanks.
talk a yeah, let's talk a little bit more about um I guess your academic side of things for UC Berkeley. I know we've talked about this before when we talk about like our EE lower div classes. Like I remember when I took E16A, I was just cramming half the time because like the way that it was structured wasn't like too motivating for me. Like I think the course staff
Yeah.
is really great, but just like sometimes the material is just like so much and overwhelming that you have to kind of cram before midterms.
Yeah,
How do
it's
you like manage everything like on the academic side of things? Not, since you're majoring in like business and ecks, like how did you like manage the academic sides of things?
yeah, I
Especially since you
mean
graduated in 3 years, which is really quick.
3.5 to
Three
be
and a
fair.
half. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I definitely like now looking back on it, I guess, like I was like a train wreck like my freshman year. Like I had no time management skills. Like I mentioned, like in high school, I had really bad study habits and I kind of just skated by on like
Hmm.
like I could like study for tests the night before and like kind of make it. And like the only thing I really had like ever truly like done long-term studying for was like standardized tests. And like I didn't apply that in school, obviously. And so when I came to Berkeley, like that first semester, one, I had to take so many classes because like I for some reason front loaded a lot, and sure that means now that I got to graduate a semester early, but
Yeah.
like I was taking like 18 units or 17 units my first semester,
What?
and I ended up like taking that many. I think it's yes until like last semester, like this
Oh
last
my
like my
God.
last semester at Berkeley, I took 13 units, which was amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I would definitely not recommend any freshman take 17 units,
Yeah.
unless you really need to like finish on time or something.
Mhm.
Um, and in terms like I definitely think like I grew every year. Like obviously you can see it in my grades, but you can also see it in like how I've dealt with things. Cause like that first 2 years, especially for like you understand for like EECS kids at Berkeley, like those are like your hardest classes almost. Like for
For
some
sure.
reason, I think most of the operatives I've taken are much easier than like the CS intro series or the EE 16A and
Mhm.
16B. Um, and I think like it's very easy to like lose like I always say lose the plot, but like lose the track, like just because you can watch those, like you'll watch the recordings later or whatever, and
Right.
like not go to lecture, and like you kind of just like forget about it, and then you think like you're in high school, you can cram it all like right
Yeah.
before. And I remember
Procrastinate. Yeah.
like I was sitting in the E16A final, and I was just like I just didn't know what was going on. Like you don't
Same.
like I was just
I
sitting in
was
the
learning
area.
throughout the final. I was like, oh, that's a cool
I was
concept.
literally learning things. I got up like I had like one fourth of the time left. I got up, I turned my test in. Everybody in there probably was like, wow, this girl's so smart. I was like, I left so many questions blank. And then I got my test back and I got literally an abysmal score. Like truly, like I mean, I'm not even scared to say I got like a 30 out of 100, okay?
Dude,
But
it'd be
then
like that.
yeah, it'd be like that because then the curve came out and they were like, a 40 and above is an A because people had failed it that badly. So like
Right.
there's two learnings, I think, for me at least, in that like one, you need to like keep your shit together, especially if you're
Right.
taking a lot of classes. And also
Definitely.
for the CS classes, or I guess the E classes, depending on like what you choose to like put your time into, like those truly are like the foundations of like,
Hmm.
like definitely everything that I learned in like 61, maybe not 61A, but 61B, 61C have come up a lot in my operatives. Like,
Right.
I guess it depends on what operatives you take, but like those ideas set you up really well if you get them down really well for
Right.
like future success, especially if you want to be like a software
Definitely agree
engineer,
with
like
that.
stuff like big O notation. Like I never truly understood it when I first learned it, and it's come up so often afterwards.
How do you
So like I have to
optimize
go,
it?
yeah, I have to go back and learn all of it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think in terms of like academics, I mean, it'll get easier over time. So like I I I definitely understand. Like I am the first person to be like, dude, like you're gonna fail some things, like that's
For sure.
fine. Like,
Yeah.
and I also like I want to be that person to be like, truly, like I know people are gonna tell you this, especially if you're gonna go into tech, like your GPA matters, like, but up to some extent, especially if you're going into tech. Like I can't speak to other fields, or I even can't speak to all of tech, but like if you're gonna become like a PM, like you don't have to focus so deeply on getting like the highest GPA possible, or feel really badly about yourself if you don't have the highest GPA possible, because it's really only one part of like the puzzle. Like Lyft, I don't think has ever even seen my GPA. So like really just like don't
Same.
worry about things. Like I think in terms of academics, like you should try your best, because when you're paying for like a great education, and it is a great education, you're not really gonna ever have a chance like that again to like just learn for the sake of learning, like for the rest of your life, right?
Hmm.
But two, like don't take like things too seriously to the point where it's like I think people at Berkeley can like also get really like I don't want to say depressed, but like sad, or like get like make that like have a weight on their shoulder for like most
Right.
of college, which I don't think is how you should like live your like college years. But yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on the point that like lower divs really matter later on for succeeding in upper div courses. And I found out like the hard way. And also it matters in like software engineering as well.
Yeah.
Um, like CS 70 was probably the hardest course I've ever taken.
Yeah, that
And
course killed me.
yeah, it's really important for CS 170. And I learned it the hard way. Like I had to relearn so much stuff about like proofs and it was
I
it
can't
was
believe I took
terrible.
CS 170. Like I just took it because everybody was like, it's a, what do they call it? They said it was like a non-required required course or
Yeah,
something.
like you need it to do
Yeah.
well in like software engineering
Yeah.
interviews.
And
Yeah.
I knew I didn't want to become a software engineer, but I still took it because I was like, oh, I need to like, and it was actually not that bad, but I had failed
Yeah.
CS 70 so badly that like
Dude, it's
I just
they're
came
so
into CS
hard.
170 being like, I have no idea what's going on. But yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely agree. I definitely think like lower divs are really important. And it's
Like
also kind of sad that like you're the youngest in college when you're learning the most important stuff.
yeah, it's totally true. And like my biggest worry is someone's gonna ask me to do like a 3-part proof at work for software engineering. So I asked like a bunch of engineers at GitHub. I was like, hey, do I have to do this at work? And they're like, nah, you're chilling. So for people that are taking CS 170 right now, it might be important for interviews, but like not so much for the job.
I
So
don't think
don't sweat
anybody's
it
ever
too
gonna be
much.
like, use what is that? There was like that one type of proof
So
where they're
annoying.
like, you just assume it's right and therefore it is right. And I was
Oh
like,
yeah,
oh,
I was
I
like, or like
lost.
proof by contradiction or something. I
Yeah,
was
I was
like,
just like,
nah, dude.
they're like, take a small subset and prove that's correct. And I'm like, this feels wrong, but cool, man.
Let's move on to, I guess, like, why did you decide to graduate early?
Good question. I mean, well, first, I kind of figured out I could graduate early like a year ago, like randomly when I was doing like my little, like I have a little Excel spreadsheet, like probably a lot of people do. Where like I write down what courses I've taken and
Hell
like what
yeah.
I need to take, you know? Yeah, hell yeah.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
so I was randomly like I was like shuffling around things and looking at like what I needed to finish in terms of requirements, and I randomly realized like, oh, if I took one class over the summer, like one of my UGBA accounting classes, then I could graduate early. And I'm an out-of-state student, so it is quite expensive every semester I'm at Berkeley, and it wasn't going to be that difficult. And so I was like, yeah, I can take it. Obviously, I like thought a lot about like, oh, one, is this going to be a lot of pressure? And like, I'm really lucky in that my parents like didn't push me to graduate early. They're like, we didn't expect you to graduate early, so there's like no, like there's not,
Right.
it's up to you what you want to do with your life.
Mhm.
But I also was like, if I do graduate early, this was back before the pandemic occurred. I was like, oh, maybe I can go traveling or like just spend some time doing something. and like take a break. Just definitely because I think like I don't think I'm really, probably I am burnt out, but I can't really sense like the thing, like the whole, like the physical portions of being burnt out. But I
Mm-hmm.
definitely like, I think I deserve a break after going
For
to
sure.
Berkeley in 3 years,
Yeah.
and I wanted to take one. Like I also at that time didn't know like if I'd need to be like looking for a job during this time in my life, or like if
Right.
I'd have a job, or like I was like, if I can do it, I'll save a lot of money, and it's not going to be that difficult for me. And like
Right.
if I do end up having a job, it's a really fun break. If I don't, it's just like some extra time I get to like really dedicate myself to job searching, or like traveling, or you know, baking, IDK. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's super smart. I think like it's really important to like take a break. I think a lot of Berkeley students burn out, unfortunately, because they're so like driven academically and professionally that they just like it just like clicks one day, or not clicks, it just
Yeah.
like snaps off one day and they just like can't handle all of their commitments at once. So it's important to like take those breaks when you can. And
Yeah.
I'm
I mean,
super
I always
happy
think,
for you. Yeah.
yeah. Thank you. I mean, I think of like, you know, like I don't know when I heard this, but like it was like a metaphor about Stanford students actually.
Hmm.
Boo. But it was it was ducks. It was like how students are ducks, and like they look really serene on the water, but underneath the water they were like paddling furiously.
Right.
And it's like I've always thought about like I think at Berkeley it's like we're not even that serene on the top, but like even below the water we're even more intense.
Yeah.
And like I think a lot of times as Berkeley students, like we're so motivated to like keep going and getting to the next step. And it's like
Right.
at the end of the day, like you're kind of doing this for yourself. And like if I definitely know how much of a privilege it is to like be able to take a break and like not worry. And like if since I have that privilege, I'm using it to like, you know, take some time off and like reset. And I don't think like nobody I've talked to has ever been like, you shouldn't do that. But definitely like if I like sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe people like think that like what is she doing for 8 months? Like she's not doing anything. But like I would never think that about somebody else. So why would anybody else think that about
Right.
me?
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's a super good point. Yeah. I think like personally for winter break, that's one of my goals is to like kind of reset. And I think
Yeah.
like at least for CS is so competitive. I don't know if you had a similar experience in like my lower divs, but oftentimes people would always talk about like internships and like recruitment. And that
Yeah.
always like kind of messed me up because I never really tied my identity to like a company name. But like I remember freshman year, I started to like get into that mindset because everyone was talking about like Google, Facebook,
Yeah.
Twitter, like all those big companies. And I was just like, okay, I guess I need to get this internship. But like it doesn't really
Yeah.
matter, I think, long term. It matters more about like who you are and like who you meet and like your support system. So I'm just
Yeah.
resetting right now and just like, you know, I think it's important to, get back to things you're passionate about. So I'm starting to, I paint, hopefully, if my parents let me. So,
Ooh.
very exciting.
Like
I
your walls or like
Oh
what?
yeah. Repainting my whole bedroom. No, just
Oh, nice.
just like painting random stuff that I used to paint in like middle school. I
Mm.
like gave up on painting once my parents were like, "Hey, you're not gonna like make any money, so like, can you not?" And I was like, "Okay." So
uh
yeah, so going back to those like old passions or like cooking, like you mentioned before, is something
yeah.
I want to learn more. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree about like the whole, especially I think at like schools like Berkeley, like people get so into the reputation aspect of
Yeah.
it, and it
Hmm.
messed with me. And I think it
It's messing
continues
with me.
to like mess with me a little bit because I think it
Yeah,
ties a lot into like the imposter syndrome that I think is
for
really
sure.
prevalent at Berkeley, where it's like you feel like
Mhm.
you have to kind of keep on par with everybody else, and this
Right.
like par is set by like some guy telling us that like Fang, kind of not Netflix, but like you know that group of
Yeah.
like companies is the best to like intern at or something. And
Or work
so
at, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so I think like I mean even in MET, I think it was like it was really like it wasn't actually intense, but in my head it was really intense.
Yeah.
In that like I would compare myself constantly to other people, and like really now like as a senior now I'm like, you know what, like you do you, dude. Like
Yeah.
it's just like it's very much
I
everybody's on
feel
their
that.
own path, and like people at Berkeley in general are like so smart and like so hardworking that like you're gonna
Right.
do whatever you want to do. Like it doesn't matter that you didn't get a Google internship your freshman year. Like if that's
Yeah.
your goal, like one day you're gonna make it. Like
Yeah.
I think it's like you can't compare yourself to like somebody else when you don't know the whole story. So like it's really like I
Right.
started off with internships at really small companies, and like
Same.
now I'm at a job that I really like, I hopefully will truly like, and I think I will like. So
Yeah.
like definitely like I think people at Berkeley don't worry about it too much, you know?
Yeah, and you always have to like start from somewhere, right? And like sometimes that like start is not, the greatest, but as long as you like work hard and you're really passionate about like said thing, like you'll get
Mm-hmm.
there. I think like sometimes when
Mm-hmm.
people are really passionate um about something, it will lead to like great results. But like when you aren't really passionate about it, but you're doing it
Mm-hmm.
because someone else is telling you to, maybe like your parents are telling you to do something, or like maybe you're like, oh, I got to do this to, maximize my net worth. Like I don't know. I don't know if like you'll succeed because you might be in that
Yeah.
profession for the wrong reasons. Unless you're in like banking, maybe. I think that makes sense if you're like maximizing your net worth. I don't know.
Dude,
But
I don't know anything about banking.
true, true. But yeah, I think that's like a really important process is
Mm-hmm.
like all the successful people you see, and like a lot of people I look up to, like Sneha and like other people in TVG, like Ruth, for example, they are all
Yeah.
started from, really humble beginnings, and they like worked really hard to like get all these opportunities and like meet all these different people. So as long as you put yourself out there and you put a lot of passion and effort into it, I think like anyone can succeed. But
That,
maybe I'm too naive, but yeah.
no, I don't think so. I mean, I think like when you do something that you really care about, like I've always been the kind of person, like I just don't do well at things I don't like to do. Like it's very
Right.
simple to me. Like I
Yeah.
don't like it's a very like obviously I will do like in a dire case of need, obviously I'll do whatever I need to do. But
Right.
like if I have a choice, I'm gonna do the things I love and I'm gonna be better at them because I want to do them and I have a passion for them.
Mhm.
And like that's something I say a lot in my interviews. And it's something that I think a lot of people usually like if I don't know, there's gonna be an interview tip, IDK, but
Hey, interview tips.
hey, don't use this if you don't like actually believe it. But like, I think like I always like to say like what is something that you think like is maybe like a weakness or not really a weakness, but like what is something like that you think is very unique about you. Like I always feel like I think I do the best at things that I really care about, and I don't tend to like I don't do well at things I don't want to do.
Right.
And I always kind of say that as like I want to do this and I'm going to put a lot of my passion towards it because like I want to do this. And I think usually most people in life are like that. Like nobody's like, nah, I like doing things I don't want to do. So I think like as long as you yourself have time to think about what you want to do, and I think that's hard, especially in today's like world. Like it's very easy to be like, what are you passionate about? And then like people expect you to have a very like honest like yes I have an answer, and I think I struggle with that a lot where it's like I don't know, like I'm like a 21-year-old like IDK. And especially when I was back in college like choosing a major, I was like I'm 18, like what the hell do you want me to know? But I also I don't know if you're allowed to curse on this podcast.
Fine, yeah.
But okay, cool. But yeah, I think like just like what you like doing, like you don't have to like call it your passion or like your meaning in life, but like just like find out the things you like to do, try to optimize so you do them more often, and I think like you'll put yourself on a path to success. At least that's like my opinion on things.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. While I was recruiting for like full-time like this semester, I was deciding between like GitHub and this financial company. And this financial company like was really nice during the whole interview, except for the last one where they like kind of like what's it called? Pressure tested me. And they were like saying like, oh, like why do you use Python? Like that's a trash language. Or like, why do you go to Berkeley? And I was like, what? Please stop.
College.
Yeah, I was like, please stop. And they're like really mean to me, but like I somehow passed it, whatever, right? And they gave me they paid me like 40% higher than GitHub. So I was like, oh my gosh, like I should take it.
Yeah.
Like they're paying me a lot more. And then I went to their day, like where you can like learn a lot more about their engineering side of things. And they're like, we're a tech company, but like they're really a finance company. But
got it.
They're like, oh, like X, Y, and Z, like like we do a lot of philanthropy, like we have a lot of cool technology. And then they talked about a lot about all this stuff. And then I talked to the engineers and it just didn't pass the vibe check. And I think like it's really important to like not necessarily just say yes to everything. Like it's important to, you know, do as much research as possible for, you know, these professional opportunities, because for me, what matters is like the people I'm working with, and what matters is like I enjoy working with the people, and I enjoy the product. And sometimes like you have these opportunities that seem like really good, but it's important to like take a step back to make sure that you would be happy in that position.
Mhm.
Like let's say you have one like where you're working like 40 hours per week, and you have one that's working like 70 hours per week, right? Like that's a trade-off, and you have to be like willing to acknowledge like, oh, I'm gonna be mentally suffering if I take this job,
Yeah.
right? So that just reminded me of like my own experiences recently. I think it's really important to look at the work you're doing and reflect if you'll be happy in that position for like future positions.
Mhm.
Because you don't want to regret like 1 year from now, because usually when you like sign a job, you'll probably be there like at least a
Yeah.
year, right? You don't want to like hurt yourself mentally and physically throughout that process, even if you're like making a lot of money. So I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the vibe check is really important. Like,
Definitely.
like
Yeah.
I think, like, I don't know, like I guess most people call it gut feeling or whatever, but the
Yeah.
vibes, I feel like though, like that's something I really care about. Like my first internship was like at a much older company, and it was really old people. And one, it was an enterprise company,
Right.
and it was interesting, but I just like realized how much I cared about like the people I work with. Like one being my age, and like two,
Right.
like I wanted to care about the product so much more. And
Same.
like that's why I was like, oh, I want to work on like more of a consumer product, see if I like that. And then when
Right.
I came to Reddit, like one, like the interview
So
process was
cool.
so fun. It was just
Yeah.
like it was like I loved the manager, like my hiring manager, and like my like then like now I guess my manager at the internship. And like I just like I had a lot of fun during the like interview process. Like we made a lot of jokes, and like it was just like it felt like a place where like I didn't have to like be really intense or like very different than who I am naturally. And then also
Right.
they seemed really to care about the product, and like they really like they were there for like a reason that was more than just like money or like some reputation or something else.
Hmm.
So yeah, I definitely think like of course like up to a certain extent a lot of like salary and other things matter, but I also think like if you're going to stay at a company for a long time and you're going to enjoy working there, like the people you work with like matter like the most. Like that's why
Definitely agree with that.
TBG, like I think like that was
Mhm.
like I only applied to TBG my second semester at Berkeley, after I applied to like every consulting club on the earth my
Yeah.
freshman first semester, because like I just like the people. And like I like got really lucky and I got in, and like I still continue to love the people obviously.
Yeah.
So I think like the vibe check in college, and the vibe check
Definitely.
for jobs
Vibe check is
is
very
like
important.
very very important. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember like when I applied to TBG during like the meet and greet part, I was talking to like, I think I talked to like Arushi, Sidra, and Mahima, and definitely passed the
Mm,
vibe check. I was like, wow, these people are like super passionate about the social sector and are super
mhm.
like driven and talented and inspiring. And
Yeah.
also talking to like Annie and Ruth, like those types of people, you're like, oh my gosh, what? These
Yeah.
guys are
Yeah. They're just like
so
so well
amazing.
spoken, very
So
passionate, like really great
eloquent.
people.
Yeah. I was like, wow, I want to be like them. So then I
Yeah.
joined, right?
Yeah.
Like let's talk a little bit more about like TBG. Like you were like a consultant and then you became a senior consultant and then like finally you became like a PL. Like
Mhm.
can you talk to me a little bit about like what made you want to be a PL and how was that experience for you? Because I feel like being a PL requires a lot of like leadership skills as well as like mentorship skills and a lot of like commitment in general. So could you talk
Yeah.
to me a little bit about that experience?
Sure. So in terms of being a PL in TBG, I mean, TBG was and probably is like one of the most important decisions I've made in college. And I think a part of becoming a PL was like a little bit of giving back to the club, at least hopefully, if I did a good job or if I had done a good job, because like the club had given me so much at that point. Like
Right.
I had been a consultant on like two different teams. I'd been a senior consultant, and like at that point, like I'd made a lot of connections. I'd grown so much, like because of TBG, I got my job at the house fund. Like
Right.
I had just become just a much better, like well-rounded person. I've been able to do things I really care about in the social sector. And then like I wanted to give back to this club that like had done so much for me as a person in college. And so like a part of that I think is like when you become a project leader, it's a lot of responsibility, but it's also like it's one of those things where I think like you help other people grow, which is always a really cool thing and a very unique thing to get so young. And then you also like really grow as a person yourself because you deal with a lot of responsibilities that like have kind of always been like you've known about them, but you don't have to actually like think about them. Like things like communicating with the client a lot, like setting a statement of work and like thinking about like a really big picture like idea. Like I'm much more like a detailed person. Like I don't want to say I'm a perfectionist, but I think a lot about like smaller things. And so I often have a hard time like zooming out in terms of a bigger picture. But like being a PL was so helpful in terms of like you have a lot of moving parts as a PL. Like so you have 4 different consultants and a senior consultant, and like you're kind of like thinking about like all of these things and how they're supposed to come together. Like you have to think like 5 weeks in advance because like when you give like your consultants a guide sheet, like they think in that week, or maybe even if they're thinking like 2 weeks in advance, but like you're thinking about like, okay, at midpoint, these guide sheets have to become a deck at the end of the day, right? Like we can't just be doing things for no reason for like 5 weeks. And so I really loved being a PL. Like my team was awesome. And I loved our client. Like I think it was really cool. The one part I think I really loved about being a PL was also like the ability to like look at our client applications and like kind of be a part of the client interview process, because like as a PL, I think you get to like choose, that's like the one time you really get to choose your client and like kind of it be something that you really are passionate about in the social sector, or like about a cause that you're really passionate about. So yeah, I mean, I loved being a PL. Like I'm really sad that like halfway through the semester we went into the pandemic, so it became remote. And so I didn't get a lot of chance to like really bond with my team that much. Obviously we're also friends, but yeah, I mean, it was a great experience. I'd tell anybody in TBG who has gotten something out of it, or like in any consulting club. I can't really speak to other consulting clubs, so I'll just speak to TBG. But I loved it. I think it's a really great way to like, I don't know, not end your journey, but like kind of like keep like a cap end on it, or like do something that really like solidifies like how much you cared about the club itself. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on it.
That's super cool. And like for project leaders, I feel like creating those guide sheets are really difficult. And like on top of that, like you have to kind of like be really good at like interpersonal stuff as well, because you have to like check in and just like make sure like everyone on the team is doing well. I think like it's especially difficult during a pandemic, right? Like making sure that like they're doing okay, like overall, like mentally. Like how did you, I guess, manage expectations, through that semester, since it was like kind of hectic midway through?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there were places that I could have been better. Like I would definitely like I definitely think there are places I could have been better, like now looking back on it. I think in terms of like interpersonal communication, I like have never been the person that's too good at that, like checking in. Like I always kind of feel like I'm bothering people, but I guess as like a PL, you kind of have to take the automatic opposite and be like in people's lives, because like like as a consultant, you know that like I'm not gonna tell my PL like I have a problem unless it's like something really big, and like you have to kind of as a PL like nag them and be like, is everything good? It's like throughout the week, and be like, hey, like let's check in, like how's your guide sheet going? Because oftentimes you and me both know like we'll come to like weekly meeting and be like everything has gone badly, and then the PL will be like, why didn't you like communicate this like earlier? And like as a consultant, I understand like their thought process, but as a PL, knowing what's going to happen, you have to counteract it. And so I think a lot of that is interpersonal communication. And you're dealing with like 4 people with like different personalities who are trying to work in a team, and then
it's a lot,
like it's a lot, right? And so I think sometimes it like it works out really well, and sometimes it takes some like work to like really get into a flow. And either way, I think like there's going to be ups and downs. But yeah, I mean, I think in terms of like what was your like, biggest advice I could give, or like in a pandemic, I mean, I think the biggest thing you can do is like check in. Like I always try to check in like double the amount of times I thought people needed me to check in. And I'm not sure, like, you can probably ask my team members and I came off as like overbearing or whatever, but like I think it helped out,
That's
especially when we
nice,
went
yeah.
into like midpoint area.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, I think like you just gotta take it as like it comes. Like some weeks are gonna be bad, and like you're gonna be like, oh my god, we like nothing is going as planned, because that's kind of what happens when you're working with a nonprofit, and like things are a little bit more vague, and like things change really quickly. But also like they're gonna like, you just kind of have to take it as it comes, and like at the end of the day, like just like remember you're doing it for a good cause. You're trying to help a nonprofit, like that's gonna help other people in some sort of way. And yeah, I mean, that's all the advice I can give.
No, that's
I don't
super
know.
helpful. Yeah, I
Okay.
think that's really great. Like, I think it's definitely important to, force yourself to check in with people. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of people like feel like they don't feel comfortable asking for help. And sometimes like as a leader, you have to put yourself in a position to, be as accessible as possible. And it seems like you did a really great job with that. So I think that's like a great advice for students. Talking about like, I guess your other, main thing that you did during college, I guess, like the house fund, like how was that experience? How's that experience been? And like, what does a typical day look like, as a student investor on that team?
Yeah. So I joined the house fund in, I think, my sophomore spring semester. So I like went through the interview process. It's like a pretty slow one during the sophomore fall, and I joined in my spring semester. Um, I had a great experience. So I worked there as a student investor, and so essentially that means I was part of the student investment team, which means like when I joined, there was one other student investor with me, and then he ended up graduating, and then we recruited two more people who are now on the student investment team after I've graduated. But essentially, what we do is like we kind of serve as a liaison between like the venture capital fund and the
Mm,
Berkeley campus, and the undergrad students to be specific.
that's super
And
cool.
so a lot of it is like there's like two parts in my understanding and like how I think I functioned as an investor. Is like one is like keeping connections with the campus organization. So we sponsor about like I think 12 campus organizations through the house fund, which means
Mhm.
like they are allowed our space. So we have a physical space in Berkeley that was open to students, and so like and like we also would like help them out with like random like if like free ventures, which is like a student accelerator. And so we help them out with like mentorship sessions or like random events. And we're not like really hands-on in any way, but it's more just like as student investors, what we try to do is like keep contact with like their executive leadership,
Mhm.
and then also like make sure that they understand like what the house fund is, like if there's any cool student startups that are coming out of those organizations, because they tend to be like we tend to partner with some of the more like entrepreneurial or tech-focused startup like student organizations with
Mhm.
students who have the most chance of becoming like tech startup founders. And so we kind of just keep that connection. And the second part is we get a lot of inbound from students who are founding a company. And I think there's a special part to it that is we only invest in Berkeley startups. So like it has to be founded by a student, alumni, or faculty member. And so
Oh,
yeah, and so any
interesting.
like Berkeley students who are undergrads, they usually get funneled to us, and like we get to talk to them, we hear their pitches, and we get to like choose whether they get funding and things like that. So that's kind of more the venture capital, like investor side of it.
Mhm.
But yeah, in terms of like a typical day, it's a very free flowing job, like very
Yeah.
much like not like I have to report to work from like certain hours to certain hours. It's much more
Mhm.
like when we would have like bi-weekly partner meetings and things like that. And we kind of just would like go to different events, like showcases, and then like student startups would reach out to us. We'd like talk to our other student investors. So in terms of like I say a typical week would be like a few student startup meetings, maybe like a weekly meeting with like the rest of the student investment team. Maybe we'd have like a weekly lunch with the whole like full-time team as well, the investment team. So like we have two partners, and I mean, we have like a 5 to 6 full-time investment team. I'm not going to
Mhm.
get into specifics,
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah. So I think that that's what it looks like, and I think it varies a lot in terms of like what you choose to focus on. So like I started a student newsletter because I thought that'd be something interesting to do. Another student does a lot of like goes to a lot of showcases and stuff. So
Mhm.
yeah, I got into it because I thought like venture capital would be something interesting to look at.
Yeah.
And it is. It's a very
That's so
interesting
cool. Yeah.
industry. But yeah, that's kind of what I did at THF.
And what have you found are like the key traits of successful student ventures like at Berkeley? Like what is like a common theme for the startups that succeed versus the startups that like might have not been as successful?
That's a complicated question because like first of
Yeah.
all, I'd like to say I don't think there is like one key factor that's
Hmm.
gonna like make you successful. So that's just like a disclaimer first off.
That's fair. Yeah.
But I think I mean in terms of like some of this like student startups that started off as student startups, they've now graduated and they're still in like our portfolio.
Hmm.
I think one thing is like who the founders are. Like I think like of course I'm gonna like stress the team and like especially because
Hmm.
we invest in like the pre-seed and seed levels, like the team are the people who like I think sometimes can make or break a startup, at least in my opinion, in terms of like I think most startups that are successful have gone through multiple pivots, and meaning that like they've changed what they're doing or
Right.
they've changed like how they're doing it or what industry they're doing things in, especially when it comes to tech because things are so easily changeable. And
Right.
so when it comes to like doing multiple pivots and the only thing that stays constant is the team becomes a really big factor. And like
Hmm.
one, how they like interpret like how they are as like together, but also who they are individually. And like I think sometimes if you have teams that are all business side or all technical side, I think sometimes that can become a problem because
Mm.
you need like people who understand each other, but also have like that together make a full rounded like team. You don't want like you can have really
Hmm.
amazing like technical developers, but like you might need somebody on the business side, but you can't have all people who are into like marketing and like communications. And if you're making a tech focused product, it just doesn't make sense. And so I think like
Yeah.
I would say like, the biggest thing in terms of student founders is like finding the right team. And then also like I think I don't know. I think sometimes students tend to like do things. Students all kind of have similar problems, and so we all kind of solve for the same things. And so oftentimes, like I will see like kind of a similar like product multiple times. So like something that looks like library availability, and like that makes sense because we're all students. We all have the same problems, but also like that's already been done quite a few times and not
Right.
very successfully. So like I think maybe sometimes you have to think outside the box. And some of the cooler ones you've seen have done like things that are very like, whoa, that's like I think there was one that was like using technology to like make better hockey players like in their helmets and stuff. And
Oh,
like
that's
that's a
cool.
very interesting. Like it's it's like if you can figure out a market, you can figure out something that like you're actually doing that's different. I think that's the biggest thing like you can have outside of your team. Like you got to do something that like your competitors aren't doing, or if they're doing, you have to do it way better. And like I think sometimes student founders will do something that another company is doing and do it just to the same level. And as investors, you can't really. It's like you're doing competitive analysis. If there's something that differentiates you from somebody else, there's no really reason to invest, at least in my opinion. So yeah, that's I think like the two biggest things that you can think about.
Gotcha. And let's say hypothetically, like I wanted to, create my own startup, like after
Hmm.
Berkeley or whatever, or in my last semester. Like,
Yeah.
what are some like strategies you would advise for students who are like looking for funding, or like general pitch strategies or like pitch deck strategies?
Yeah. I mean, I think in terms of like if you're looking for funding, um, you should definitely do some research into like how venture capital funding works because it is a bit confusing and there's a
Hmm.
lot of terminology and jargon that's thrown around, especially when you get into pitch meetings.
Right.
So like, like what is your like valuation, like cap, like what kind of like safe are you doing, like things like that like you need. I think
Hmm.
of course if you're like a young founder, you want to like hopefully a VC firm would be like good about like helping you through things, and like that's something that like the house fund taught me is like to be really helpful, especially so like if you're a Berkeley founder, I definitely say reach out to the house fund.
Yeah.
Like even if we don't invest, our student investors team like really likes to help out in like helping you understand how the investment cycle works.
Hmm.
And then also get you in contact with like other venture capital firms. So in terms of like, I guess getting into contact in general, I mean, I think a lot of cold emailing is done, like so many cold emails. So I guess you can do that, but also if you have a connection at a VC firm, that's going to be like 10 times better than cold emailing, in my opinion. Obviously, you can still do that, but yeah. So I think like one, you should do your research about a VC firm. So like we sometimes will get a lot of cold emails where like we can only invest in Berkeley affiliated startups. And so people will email us and be like, from random universities like all around the world, and we'll be like, we just can't invest. And so like if you do your research on a VC firm and like you target it a little bit more, you're probably going to get a higher response rate, especially if you can like craft a well thought out email, which there's like a lot online. Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of pitch strategies, I think just rehearse it a few times. I think like an MVP, a prototype, whatever you want to call it, is like worth so many words. Like it's just like sometimes I think people come with like just a deck and like a few like screenshots or like whatever. If you're really young with a student founder, I think that's fine. But still, like an MVP, especially if you're doing something tech related, is like the best thing you can do. And I think we don't really. It's a little bit harder to get somebody on board with nothing done, right? And so I think that. And then if you're looking for like much larger funding, or you're an alumni, like you're older on in your career, we expect a little bit more as investors from you, like either like a few sales have already been done, or like whatever. I don't know whatever you're doing, but like you've got to have some traction essentially. And so that's the biggest thing I think you can show in a pitch is like some kind of form of success. And you're also going to expect investors to prod. Like we're going to ask like a lot of questions. So if you put something on your slides, like be ready to defend it. And yeah, I mean, I don't think like VC funding, I do want to say like, especially for student founders, like if you don't need VC funding and there's no reason for it, I wouldn't like just put yourself through it, because it's a lot of work. And like if you can bootstrap or like fund yourself, or at least for a little bit, and then like kind of gain more traction, you should do it, I think. But obviously that's like a decision to each their own. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of resources. I would do your own reading. Like we read venture deals like when we first joined the team. So I mean, that's a cool book if you really want to understand venture capital, like
That's cool.
like truly deeply. But yeah.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And I guess the last topic I wanted to talk about on the podcast was a little bit more on like just like in a general scheme of things. Like remember when we got dinner at Racha's and I asked for a lot of advice? Like one thing that we talked a lot about, and I think it has been really helpful, and I think you have like a lot of great insights about, is like I guess like finding, you know, your soulmate at UC Berkeley. Like you gave me a lot of great advice, and I just had a few questions around that realm. Like, do you have like any general like relationship advice for like college students at Berkeley? Because especially in like EECS, for example, it's a little bit hard to put yourself out there or like find someone that you really vibe with. Like how do you meet like your potential soulmate, or like how do you, you know, create those opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I mean, I am definitely not the one to give this advice, considering I did not meet my soulmate at UC Berkeley. But I mean, sure, let's like the blind lead the blind, you know? But I mean, I don't know. I think like put yourself out there. Let me tell you the things I should have done, not looking back on it. I think like put yourself out there and like, you know, like it's only 4 years. Like the time goes by really quickly. Like I don't know how else to stress that, but like before you know it, like you're gonna be like done, or like you're a junior now. Like it feels like you're like still a freshman to me. So like I definitely think like, I don't know, like put yourself out there. Like what's the worst that's gonna happen?
True.
Yeah, I mean, become friends with people. Like I definitely think like one of the things that I take away from Berkeley, even though this isn't exactly around like the romantic relationship, is like having like a friend, like having friends that you really care about, and like having close friends. And also just like joining clubs. Like I love TBG for the work we do, but also like the people. And like now looking back on it, some of the best memories I have is from our club. And so like, I don't know, if you want to meet people, join a club. We don't really date a lot within TBG, so we got TBG, but like another club. And I don't know, in EECS, just like shoot your shot. If you're a girl, like there's so few of us. At EK, maybe your odds are better. Who knows? If you're a guy, shoot your shot as well. Your
Lower
odds are
chances.
not bad. I don't know. Yeah, like I don't know. I mean, I think everybody at Berkeley, I don't know where I'm going with any of these sentences. You know, just like I also think people at Berkeley, like we spend so much time like thinking about the academics that we forget like how to have fun and like let go. And so like
Yeah.
a part of that is like, you know, like you're in college, like do whatever you want to do, like go to parties, have fun, like do everything responsibly, but like, you know, live your dreams. So a part of that is like, you know, you like nobody thinks about you as much as you think about yourself, as much as you think they're thinking about you. So like,
Yeah,
go off.
that's a good
It's
point.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think like people like I think
Yeah.
I can even see it in you and myself. Like I think we've gotten better as we've gone through Berkeley, kind
Yeah.
of being like, who gives a shit? So
Yeah, like
you know,
no one's thinking like half the things you're thinking.
yeah, nobody thinks about you as much as you think about yourself. So it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, just like do a bunch of stuff, you know.
Exactly.
Responsibly, yeah.
Yes, responsibly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really helpful. And I guess let's end off with to just wrap this whole thing up. Do you have anything you'd like to plug like on your behalf?
Do you want to plug?
Yeah, anything you want to plug, like any social media or anything in particular?
No. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, nobody needs to follow me on Instagram. I post something like once a year. I'm playing Animal Crossing now that I've graduated.
What's your username?
Just started. I literally just started last night, so I can't even plug my island. I think it's called Fajitas though. My island's called Fajitas. I didn't understand we were supposed to name it like an island, so I just like put in like it's fine. Yeah, man, it was. I don't have anything to plug. But yeah, definitely reach out. Probably find me on LinkedIn. I don't know.
Yeah, you have a really good LinkedIn.
That's so funny because there's nothing on there. It's literally just my companies and like what I did. I haven't even updated that. I'm like, it's fine. You know? Yeah. So this has been awesome.
Yeah.
Keep listening because Ethan's probably gonna bring on some really great guests.
Yeah, thank you so much for
even better.
being like our third guest of the podcast. So excited.
I'm so honored.
Yeah, so excited to have like such a wonderful person stop by. So yeah, thanks so much and take care.